Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. And Dorothy, I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, because I can barely hear me, but that's okay. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too.
I hope you had a good holiday.
I did. It was quite restful.
Do you believe we're starting our
ninth year, I think it is.
We're in the middle of our 9th year.
Yeah. Hard to believe it's been that long, huh?
I know, almost a decade. We were fortunate to end the year with a show of some of the best shows of 2017, covering a lot of topics that are important in Moore County. And
yeah, we covered quite a few.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to...
How you narrowed down the list of all those good shows we had, I don't know.
Well, there were many more, but...
yeah, we had a lot.
In this year, I think we're going to wind up doing the same thing. There are a lot of hot-button topics, and political, school-related, service-related, nonprofit-related. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you stick with me for 12 more months.
I'll try.
Okay. We one of the things we talk about so much on the show is the beauty and the natural charm of Moore County and our area, and how so many people who have moved here, transplants, they're drawn to the area, and we always say it reminds us of the town we grew up in as kids.
Yeah. With
a strong New England feel, and interestingly enough, our guest is originally from New England, the Boston area, I guess, and I'm talking about Geoff Cutler, who is the owner of Cutler Trees in Southern Pines, and yes, it's a full-service tree care company, but what he doesn't say is it's a full-service tree care company with a conscience. And I think when we listen to Geoff today speak about his craft and the nature of Moore County, I think you'll see in between the lines the conscious part that comes out. You've been doing this for... Good morning, by the way, and Happy New Year.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you.
You've been doing this for over 30 years?
I have. I got started right after high school. It was a summer job that mutated into a career.
Mutated?
Mutated, yeah.
Most people think mutated is a bad word.
Well,
it evolved.
It just surprised me that it ended up happening, because I figured I'd be in an office somewhere, but I discovered that I much preferred being outside.
Right.
And my brother and I had a small tree care company in Boston, and I kind of followed him around because he had started it before I joined.
Right.
And I followed him around, and then I went to school for tree care, became a certified arborist with what at the time was the National Association of Arboriculture. And once I learned a little bit, what I was cutting all day, I began to start appreciating the industry a lot more.
You've been very active in the community over the years as well. I mean, you've served on the board of the Episcopal Day School, Stars Charter School. You've been president of the Sandhills Youth Soccer League, which tells me you've had a lot of kids.
2 kids. I have 2 kids aged 28 and 26. One lives here.
Seriously? 28 and 26?
28 and 26. One lives here, and I have a son who's in China and has been there now for almost 10 years.
What's he doing in China?
He works with education and curriculums for Chinese children who come and study in America, whether that's in high school or up into colleges, and he creates curriculums for these kids.
Yeah. You've also served on the Weymouth Center Board of Directors, Southern Pines Appearance Commission, and you're currently the vice president of the Sunrise Theater.
That's right.
So whatever culture there is in Southern Pines, it seems like you've had your hand in the or your foot in the circle of a lot of different organizations.
Well, I guess that's right. I'm not too quick on my feet, so when people say, would I volunteer for this, I tend to say yes.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just snowballed over the years, and I think it's important, especially in a smaller community like ours, to be involved in it as much as you can.
And you also, you did some writing for the pilot?
I did. For a number of years, I wrote a column which was published in the Sunday papers. It tended to be somewhat political, which worked for some people in our community and not so well for others.
Right.
And then I had a column called Thoughts from the Manshed, and that was more just telling stories. And they could be stories about life here or in Boston or what have you.
In between the lines, I get that you love this community.
I have fairly well-established roots in this community. I'm fourth generation. My great-grandfather came when Mr. Tufts was building Pinehurst, and he came at about that time and was actually friends with Mr. Tufts.
Really?
They both were in the resort business.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Tufts on a much larger scale. But my great-grandfathers had a small resort, which still goes today in Michigan. And I have some old letters, and some of them are humorous in that Mr. Tufts thought that my great-grandfather, was very great in the minutia of some of the things to do with hotels, like what was the cheapest way to get the linens laundered. And my great-grandfather was pretty good at that, keeping costs down, and Mr. Tufts thought that was great. So he then built a house over in Southern Pines, and that house has come down generation to generation. So when I was a little boy, I'd come down here on the train from Boston and stay with my grandmother, who was living in our house at that time. So, yeah, we've been around for a while here.
You have a penchant a little bit for history here, a little bit of a historian.
A little bit.
Natural, that's just an evolving from your parents and their parents, and I sense that you do. How many years have you been here, living here?
My wife and I came in 1995.
Okay. From your perspective, talk to me a little bit about, even before we start to get into your business, and because your business is sort of tied into the beauty of the area, the charm of the area. There's a lot of hot topics these days about trees, and we're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of the show. What kind of changes have you seen since '95? I came here 4 years after you, and I've seen a ton of changes. The area has undergone a lot of different. It's different than it was 20 years ago.
It's remarkably different than it was 20 years ago, and it's kind of surprising to me just how fast that's happened. I mean, we're not talking about a century. We're talking about some 20 years or so.
Right.
And just as 1995, I don't remember. Even though that was considered a good time for building houses, I don't remember the type of growth that we're seeing now. And I think we all know that we've had an influx of people coming with the military and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
They say that the golf tournaments, the U.S. Opens, created an interest by others to come here.
I don't know that that's necessarily the case.
I just don't know, but I do know that the most basic way to tell that the growth is occurring is just by driving your car around. And I'm reminded now of what it was like living in a bigger city where everybody was in a rush to get somewhere.
Right. Do you remember, just last weekend, Laura Douglas and a few others at the Pilot put a whole series of articles together about more county being discovered, the real estate market booming, traffic issues as a result of the growth. I mean, everything about the new year with Moore County was about growth, and it's happening like right before our eyes. So your words are prophetic because it echoes a lot of what people were writing about and are talking about today.
Bill, I think I think that the powers that be are surprised.
Yeah.
Just how quickly this has happened. I think there was a point in time where growth was something that everybody wanted, and I think that it's occurring so fast now that some of those articles may have something to do with trying to figure out how to put the brakes on some of this. And this is the way growth tends to happen. If you're from a big city or a city that grew very quickly, you kind of wake up one day and you realize that the place that I loved and cherished for its is gone.
Right.
And I think that I just hope that that's not what we're going to see, where all of a sudden everybody's going to wake up and they're going to say, oh my God, what happened to my little Southern Pines in Pinehurst?
So there are parts of our area where you can drive around and you can absolutely feel the urbanization of those areas. And the areas become indistinguishable from other areas in the country. But there are still those pockets of neighborhoods that are almost unchanged since the 1950s, which is what I think drew people here initially. Beautiful neighborhoods loaded with character and ambiance and charm, and literally like living in a postcard. And then you get in your car and you drive 2 miles and you're at either a big box retailer or you're at the sprawling concrete, the shopping centers that are popping up, and how many grocery stores and how many. I mean, there's just such an abundance now. When you moved here in 1995, do you remember how many restaurants you could go and eat at?
Not many.
Not many.
But I remember a time when you could drive down Route 1 and the best restaurant was Hardee's.
That's right.
And there wasn't a whole hell of a lot more down there.
That's right.
And some of those roads were still sand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's no question.
Back in the middle 80s, tell you a true story, I was parked off Highway 1, kind of close to where the Burger King is now, and I was down here on a golf trip. And we were getting something to eat, and then we were jumping in the car to run up to Raleigh to catch a flight back up north. And in my hustle, I left my wallet on the top of the car, got in the car, took off on Highway 1, and saw the wallet fall in the rear view mirror, right on the highway. I pulled the car over, got out of my car on one, walked back on the highway. It wasn't really a highway. Picked up the wallet. There wasn't a car in sight. Got back in the car again. Today, I would be roadkill.
Yeah.
And I would never forgot that story. Today, the sprawl it's crazy. And this year in 2018, there's a lot of conversation about the roads, super streets, trying to make things easier to get around to try to relieve some of the congestion. It's going to be we have a lot of change in front of us.
I just hope that the infrastructure is there to do it, because you'll notice that in cities like Charlotte, for example, or other cities where the infrastructure isn't there to begin with, it can be a nightmare to get your cars around.
Bottleneck.
What about water?
Yeah.
Do we have the water for this?
Right.
I mean, if you look at the pipes in Southern Pines, Aberdeen, these are some old pipes.
Yeah.
What happens every time you plug a new hole in these things?
Yeah.
I'm no expert, but you got to ask the question.
Yeah.
I remember, excuse me. I remember when there was one traffic light between Southern Pines and the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And RDU, and I think I'm correct in saying that light was at Sanford.
Uh-huh. Yeah, probably where the Exxon station is and the McDonald's at this point. I think I know where you're talking
Well,
about.
there are a lot more now.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Yeah,
You know?
it's changed. Being in the business that you're in, you kind of get to be an artist in a way, don't you? The way you approach your business. We have a lot of challenges with our landscape in preserving, and yet in accommodating growth. And a lot of these articles last week spoke about it. These new developments that are going up that don't seem to pay as much attention to the landscape as I'm assuming you would like to see.
I would. I would like to see development occur by trying to protect and preserve some of the trees that are on the pieces of land where these developments are occurring. There are a number of different pressures on developers, and probably the foremost of those is that when you are building properties, you're moving dirt around for the foundation, and a lot of times that dirt ends up spread out over existing tree root systems. And what tends to happen, particularly with deciduous trees, is roots suffocate. So the homeowner moves into the house, and he likes the trees that were left behind, but they're in the process now of dying because so much earth was moved around. You've got caterpillars and tractors and bulldozers. And I think what's happening in a lot of cases is that developers realize it'll cost them less in the end to clear cut and replant from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And that's why you don't see, the beautiful large longleaf pines stay behind or the big oaks. Mm-hmm. And it's tragic, but those I think are pressures that developers face. And a lot of times I think what happens is the homeowner comes back on the developer when the beautiful oak tree dies and says, what the hell?
Right.
And so I think that's what's going on there.
And I could hear a developer say, density is important in order to make, because the prices of the land is going up. In order to make it financially feasible, they need to have a higher density, and they need to cater to the people that are coming in, which we're talking about primarily military at this juncture, because that's really where a lot of our growth has been coming from. But it's kind of hard. It's no one's going to be pleased 100% either way, and trying to find a middle ground is I guess the best option.
Well, there was an effort a bunch of years ago, not too many, and by concerned citizens in Southern Pines, as well as town council and people that they got to come consult, and the result of that was called the Long Range Plan.
Right.
And I think that if you look into that Long Range Plan carefully, you're not going to see that it said, let's build 40 houses on one piece of property like you just mentioned.
Right.
So I'm sort of upset to see that.
Yeah.
Now, for those people who want to protect trees in a development on a private property where they're building a house, there are ways to do that. I've advertised for years in the pilot that I could help you to save trees as you build your house.
Right.
I've never had anybody call me on it.
Let's, Geoff, let's come back in the second set, and let's talk a little bit more about your business and a couple of other things to talk about. We want to talk a little bit about Midland Road, some of the things going on in the news about the median and safety because of traffic, and it's all stuff that touches what you do. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our second set of All Things Moore County. Our guest today is Geoff Cutler, the owner of Cutler Tree in Southern Pines. And Geoff has a unique perspective on the area. And Geoff, I moved here 4 years after you did, and with the bad weather this past week and the cold weather, everybody is, I've seen crews out this summer trimming trees over power lines. And when I bought my house on Weymouth Road back in '99, 6 weeks later we had that massive snowstorm in January of 2000, and I must have dropped 20 trees on my property, and it was so overgrown to begin with. I sort of got a head start on getting the lot cleared, but I remember talking with the guys who were doing it. I was trying to be so careful, like don't affect this tree, don't affect that tree, because some of them had a beautiful symmetry, but some of these pines were so brittle, and they just snapped and boom. I was just lucky that none of them fell on the house, but it gave me a head start to try to recultivate the property. And today I look at it and I always think back to '99. I was able to maintain the integrity of the property, and that's kind of what you do in your business, isn't it, when you're out?
We're a little bit different in that we treat removals of trees on properties unless they're trees that shouldn't be there to begin with. And by that I mean, we had years of planting Bradford pears and Leyland cypresses and river birches, which just are not natural to the landscape. So, a lot of times I don't have so much of a problem removing those from people's properties, but we really try and protect, preserve, and promote the longleaf pine because that's what grows here.
Right.
We live in a very unique ecosystem where this sand makes it difficult for trees that we might like to introduce here. It just doesn't work in a lot of occasions. So when I was starting my tree care business down here, I was known as the guy who wouldn't cut your trees, which was sort of a slow way to start my business. But in a lot of cases, the homeowner would want to remove a longleaf pine, and I would try and educate and convince the client to keep the tree.
Right.
And there are various pruning techniques that you can use to cut down on wind resistance, or if the tree's too close to the house and you're scared it's going to fall on the roof, there are ways you can prune that. Or just a matter of simple deadwood pruning. Too often the pine cones, the sticks, they come crashing down
right.
all year.
Right.
And the homeowner thinks that, well, I need to get rid of that tree.
Yeah.
And so we really try and protect against that as best we can and make the tree work more fluidly with the property.
Is a longleaf pine as brittle as just a common pine tree that we see swaying in the wind during windstorms and ice storms, and it makes us all so nervous? Oh my gosh, we have to make sure.
I was thinking about what you said in the regarding the trees that came down on your property in that snowstorm.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier to me that there was a lot of wisteria on the property.
A lot.
We have a property close to yours, and we saw longleaf pine snap in half. But the longleaf pine we saw snap in half also had wisteria climbing up it. And you may have noticed, or at least on our property, wisteria went from one tree to another.
That's right.
So you had a band. When the wind started to blow, one tree wanted to go one way.
That's right.
And the other tree wanted to go another way, and that's what snapped the tree in half.
We had vines everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere.
It's very rare to see a longleaf pine snap.
Okay.
What you tend to see, unless it's had a situation like that, what you tend to see is broken limbs in snowstorms because the needles are out on the end of the limb.
Right.
In that case, we had rain before we had snow, And
the January snowstorm?
So the snow really piled up on those pine needles,
right.
and the limbs snapped.
Right.
That's mostly what we saw. In hurricanes, and we've had plenty of those, in hurricanes, we did not really tend to see the longleaf come up out of the ground because of its taproot, unless that taproot was a taproot that ran laterally across the ground because it's sitting in clay. Mm-hmm. The well-anchored longleaf is 10,000 pounds per square inch tensile strength.
It's not going anywhere.
It's like an oak.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about a really sturdy wood, much sturdier than the other pines we have in the area, and by that I mean the loblolly.
So do people generally ignore the climbing vines, whether it be ivy or wisteria, on their trees? And are they, in fact, weakening agents? Because I remember cutting at the bottom of some of the trees and seeing everything that had grown up on the trees just eventually turn brown and die. But you had all the roots left. You saw the fossils or something going up there.
Those are the clinging. The vines. Some vines are more dangerous to trees than others. Wisteria obviously being the number one because that's known as a strangling vine.
Right.
But there are other vines that are known as clinging vines, and which would include the various ivies, which were nowhere near as dangerous as dangerous to the trees as the wisteria. Generally speaking, a tree doesn't want vines going up it. If you can help it, it's a good idea to keep all vines off our longleaf pines. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with keeping keeping your trees as vigorously growing as possible, and things like vines impede that, and so we get secondary issues. The bark beetles. That's one of the things we struggle with here.
Right. Do you do as much planting as you do tree removal for people?
We do some planting. I usually subcontract that to nurseries in the area. So it just is easier to have them come in with material that they're growing and put it in the ground.
Would you make the call or the recommendation as to what type of tree would
Very often I do.
Suited?
Very often I do. And as I say, we try and stick closely with what we know grows here. That's a big effort, countrywide, is you try and grow trees that are native to the ecosystem where you live.
Besides a longleaf pine, what are some of the trees that people should be considering for this area? As you mentioned, Bradford pear, no. You said a couple of them that were not indigenous to the area.
The Bradford pear, the Leyland cypress, and the river birch are all trees that are introduced for the most part. The river birch is not a good tree because its root systems are so crazy. They lift up driveways. They tend to drop stuff all year long.
And they suck water from everywhere else.
It's not a great tree. The Leyland cypress, everybody thought was a good buffer, but we put in so many that they then became prone to disease because they were growing too fast. The Bradford pear, the same thing. There was a tree that was grown en masse because the great mature city street trees, the elms, the oaks, the maples, toppled over in their sidewalks.
Right.
And so nationally, the industry looked for a replacement tree, and the Bradford pear seemed to be that tree. So they went in by the millions.
Yeah.
And people love the early flowers, the nice, pleasing shape, so on and so forth. The problem is they reach maturity, and at that point, because they're so multi-stemmed with tight V crotches, they fall apart. And so plenty of people who live here in Moore County have faced having to remove their Bradford pears because they fall apart just when they think they're most attractive.
And you're right about the Leyland cypress trees because people use them as buffers, and if they're cared for, they're beautiful. But when you see an unhealthy Leyland, is it Leland or Leyland? How do you pronounce it? I don't even...
Leyland.
Leyland.
The problem with the Leyland cypress is that it makes a good blocking from your neighbor's privacy hedge.
That's right.
But it's a tree, and it grows to 70 feet if left to its own devices.
Right.
So homeowners become forced to top them or push them back so they're
Right.
not overwhelming the driveway or what have you.
Right.
And in the last 10 years, they were attacked by a canker disease known as Botrytis vera. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that word correctly, but so now you're seeing a lot of them die off, and we're replacing with arborvitae, but there again, we are introducing a tree that you're more apt to see in a colder climate, not in the Sandhills. So those are some of the issues that we deal with there.
You remember, like I do, before the Morganton Road bypass was in place, connecting from old US 1 to now to the shopping centers. It was all trees. Now you see these torn up, barren areas where pockets are completely gone. What do you make of all that? 'Cause
Inevitability, I guess.
Yeah.
Privately owned land that was sold for people made money, and
Yeah.
that's what's got the name of that game, I think.
We're facing. There's been a lot of publicity about Midland Road, which we're going to talk about a little bit today, and I think Steve Adams is going to join us. His radio station is right here on Midland Road. Because of the increase in growth and the increase in traffic, there's a lot of publicity out there about removing some trees for safety. And that's going to be a hot topic, I think, in 2018.
I think it is already.
Yeah, I think it is already, too.
There's a lot of letters I notice coming into the pilot with upset Moore Countians.
People want to preserve and not change. Are in your opinion, are trees safety issues?
Only in the case of sightline hindrance.
Right.
And by that I mean when you're trying to pull onto a road from another road and you can't see because there's a tree in your way,
right,
or foliage.
That's right.
That's the only time I can
Yeah.
think of right now where an inanimate object is the danger rather than the person driving the car.
Yeah. The preponderance of pine trees in our area, I've noticed that the utility crews do a great job each year preparing for winter, for the ice, of topping off or clearing the power lines so that if anything does snap and break, it's away from the lines, which we have to always be careful of.
It's a catch-22 situation for the utility companies. They get in trouble when they come and what most people think of as indiscriminate cutting of the trees near power lines.
Right.
But then they get in trouble if they don't do it, and
Right.
the power goes out.
That's right.
So there are standards, national standards, on how they are supposed to handle those trees around power lines, and too often it doesn't work out right, and the tree becomes terribly misshapen.
Yeah.
And that's a concern for a lot of homeowners, and there was a lot of upset the last few times the power companies came through.
Yeah.
There are solutions to that we're not employing, which is to remove those trees rather than chop at them every time they need to be cleared back, and plant trees that stay underneath the power lines.
Right.
The other solution, which is being tried, I believe, in communities in the States, is instead of planting in the sidewalk in that little grass space, get with the homeowner who lives behind the sidewalk and put the tree behind the power line on the private property.
So it grows inside the power line.
If the municipalities are going to be planting trees anyway,
Right.
why not strike a bargain with the homeowner
Right.
and put those big trees back behind the power lines?
Yeah, good thought. Let's come back in the third set. Let's talk a little bit about Midland Road and some of the growth that's going on and how the trees might be affected. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be back in a minute with Geoff Cutler. Welcome back to our third and final set, speaking with Geoff Cutler of Cutler Tree Service. Before I start, Geoff, if people do want to reach you, they can call your office directly at 910-692-7769. You don't have a web page. You've been doing marketing over the years in the traditional methods, but I guess referrals are the best resource anyway. And you've had that experience, so I guess you're not missing a whole lot.
I hope not.
Right. If so, we can create a Facebook page, which you said your kids would not allow you to be on.
That's right. When Facebook was growing, they said that's good for us, Dad, but not you.
Okay.
And so I'm pretty oblivious to the Facebook world.
Well, you're a Southern Pines resident. People can call you at 692-7769.
That's right.
And get some information from you and start the conversation. We're being joined this set with Steve Leader Adams, who is not only the owner of the radio station, but his station is on Midland Road. And you and I, Geoff, were talking about Midland Road, and you mentioned site issues. When I drive to the station, me personally, I don't have an issue with the trees on Midland Road. But I do have an issue with some of the small turnarounds on the median where when I jump over from one side to the other, I can't see the oncoming traffic. And that's a site issue, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes.
There's sandy turnarounds, and there's one right in front of your station. It's a safety issue. I always pull the nose of my car out and I look, and I think to myself, what if I were 30 years older and I'm driving a big old Lincoln or something, and my reaction time might not be so great? I worry because of all the different generations here that are driving at different speeds. And that's an issue that I have. And you've been here how many years on Midland Road?
25.
Yeah, and you've seen Midland Road. Oh my gosh, talk about perspective. You've had a perspective of what's happened on Midland Road over that time.
Well, yeah, it started out, it was a lot narrower road. In fact, when you went down the road, you didn't feel comfortable going by anybody because the road was too narrow.
Mm-hmm.
And if people didn't keep a perfect chalk line straight down the lane, they'd easily tap your side of your car.
Right.
So it basically was a one-lane road with 2 lanes on it. And eventually the state came along and they widened both sides of the road by a few feet, which made it a lot easier to go
Mm-hmm.
by a car.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no longer a one-lane road with 2 lanes on it. It was a functional 4-lane road.
Mm-hmm.
And today, though, I feel like that the state is basically trying to pull a real publicity stunt over the eyes of the residents of this county. First of all, I understand your concern about sight lines and all that.
Yeah.
But we got to make a decision as to whether or not, because there's no perfect way to cure that other than plow every tree down.
Well, no.
Then you got open sight lines.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to do that.
No, but it becomes a character issue. This is the one road that defines this county. This is the road that is the signature
Yep.
to the grand interests of Pinehurst and all that it offers, and Southern Pines,
Yep.
what it offers. And this is the road, it just says this is the character of our community. Now, there are other roads like Linden Road and McKenzie Road where the trees are close to the edge of the pavement,
Yep.
where, again, you have to be careful. But the one unique statistic that came out in all of this is that Midland Road has a lower collision rate than the state average. Now, to be fair, the damage of the collision is greater than normal
Yep.
on each collision.
Yep.
Because of the trees. Now, one of the reason it has a lower collision rate is because the trees force you to drive safely. Otherwise, you're going to damage your car severely or get killed. People have been killed on Midland Road hitting the tree. There was a person killed not too long ago that smacked right into a tree that was basically in the middle of the median. And one thing that was in the picture in the pilot was right there in the driver's floorboard was the cell phone. You know, I don't know whether that contributed to it or not. You never hear the ends of investigations to tell you the cause of the accident. They say it's under investigation, but you never hear the end. But back on the point, this is our road that adds to character of this community. You know, we need to find a way to leave it alone. Now, what they did at the public viewing was very deceptive on the part of the state and Kimley Horn. They came and had 2 aerial views of the road. One of the aerial views had a star representing every cut through on Midland Road,
right.
And the stars were big, and a lot bigger than what the cut throughs were. But that was to make it look all cluttered up and down
right.
Midland Road.
Right.
And then they had another aerial view with the turnarounds with small little red dots representing the 4 turnaround points.
Okay.
And it was very deceptive. People come in there and, oh, yeah, that looks less cluttered than that. But what they don't realize is that these little red dots are big turnarounds. They're going to mow down a lot of trees. I went up to the guy and I, let him know I wasn't ignorant to the what's going on here. And I told him, I said, all right, if you got turnarounds, you got plans. No, we haven't gotten that far yet. I said, well, how many trees are you going to mow down? He said, 168. I said, well, if you know exactly which trees you're going to mow down, you must have a plan. And no, we haven't gotten that far yet. I said, well, you're lying to me now. How many were you going to cut down? He said, 360 some. And I said, well, you know how many you were going to cut. Now you know how many you're going to cut. Where are the plans? And then where's the detail on these turnarounds? How much pavement are you going to be putting down? How big is it? And the drainage and all that goes with it. That's just going to wipe out all the scenic beauty of this corridor here.
Yeah.
And the corridor is going to become almost as sterile as 211 over there in front of the hospital.
I love Midland Road. It's one of the most iconic roads in all of Moore County. But I have also, since I've been here since '99, I see how traffic has picked up. I see developments that have been put up on Midland Road, and there are more people coming in and out. In the town, when there's ever an appeal for a development, traffic patterns, how many more cars are going to be coming in and out all day? Doesn't that make the road less safe, even though it's beautiful?
Yes and no. One thing that's left out of the equation is technology. The technology is one of the cures for the problem. New cars coming online have side collision technology. They have forward collision technology, rear collision technology that will keep the road safer. And, as more and more cars get this technology, it becomes safer. We don't have to wipe out all the trees. Now, a lot of people are screaming for, just traffic enforcement of the current speed limits.
Right.
Many people are hollering for a lower speed limit. I personally don't think we're at the point we need to lower. Someday it will reach that point. I don't think we're there today, and I don't want to lower it for when we might need it in 10 years.
Yeah.
But
Geoff, I have a question to ask you. We referenced you in the first set as an artist with a canvas. If you're looking at the Midland Road canvas right now, knowing what you know, and knowing what's going on with the conversations about how they're going to deal with the trees, what do you see as a solution?
I think the solution is actually the opposite of what's intended. This was a situation that before DOT got involved, we were talking about when I was on the Appearance Commission, and I've talked with the mayor about it. There are 71 cutovers between Southern Pines and Pinehurst.
Is that right?
71. I
Is that
counted
right?
them today on
What?
the way in here. They're either man-made or they're made by a homeowner who makes his own cutover.
Okay. Every driveway has a cut through.
Yeah. Some of them are paved, some aren't. Some are gravel, some are pine needles. If I were in charge, I would fill those with more trees. I would fill up all the cutovers, and I would move the cars to the 3 existing large intersections and do a U-turn. And right there, you're going to stop a lot of the site issues that you brought up initially.
Right. They're there. They're there. Every time you try to cut through somewhere, You have to just nose out and look
Yeah.
and reach forward over your driving
Right.
wheel. Yeah.
But I think it's just it defies logic
Yeah.
to think that somehow cars hitting trees are the trees' fault.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. So I think there are a lot of ways to alleviate the situation that exists, but it doesn't include cutting down 100, 300, or otherwise. It has to do with just managing traffic on Midland Road, and I would disagree with Steve in the sense that I think the speed limit should be lowered. Just because
coming
people,
in the minority on that one.
well, people are just careless,
I am.
and you know, I've read one article, and it was in the Aberdeen Times website that admitted that one of these cars that flew off the road into the trees was cell phone texting, you know, as a result of texting.
Right.
One.
Right.
Now, does that really square with the amount of single vehicle accidents we have in our community of cars flying off the road for no reason? Lower the speed limit, drive carefully, and the trees aren't going to hurt you. It's that simple.
Is the issue, I'll play devil's advocate, it's not just driving on Midland Road, it's the coming onto Midland and coming off Midland Road that also can cause some issues with the growth and the development that's going on.
That's the sightline issues. You
You
notice
call that a
that-
sightline
yeah,
issue,
Those
okay.
are the sightline issues, and
Okay.
that I agree with. I have a
Okay.
problem with that.
Okay.
It's hard for me to get out of James Creek onto Indiana because there's a row of Leyland cypresses, and I can't see around them.
Right.
And those people at 8 o'clock in the morning are flying,
That's right.
and so it presents a hazard.
Well, you always have the option of turning right, going down, coming back. But, you know, the way they got it playing now, like just turn into this radio station. I'll have to go half a mile down the road, the loop road,
Yeah.
where the big turnaround's going to be. And that poor man in that iconic house there on the corner, in the big white house, you know,
Which corner are you talking about?
at Loop and
On Knoll Road?
Knoll Road and Loop, yeah.
I-
Knoll Road and Pinehurst.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I would say that
His
that
front
it's
yard's going to disappear with a big old turnaround in it.
it's an inconvenience, but it's one that's better than cutting down all those trees you're talking
I
about.
agree,
Because,
don't cut
like
them down,
like
but
you say, it's an iconic.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But they're playing calls for cutting them down.
I know.
That's what I
It's
don't like.
illogical.
We don't want to look like Cary, North Carolina.
No. Well, look
But
what they
there are
did
some
to Route 1.
But there are some areas now around here that do. And there are a lot of people like you and people who have been here for a long time who don't want the nature of the landscape to change. And it is changing. But it's changing in pockets. It's not changing everywhere.
Right.
And
There are a lot of people who are still upset about the crepe myrtles that were yanked out of Route 1
yeah,
for those guardrails. I don't remember a traffic problem there. And
is that why they took them out? They were beautiful.
Yep, because some DOT regulation said the guardrail had to be there. So
Okay.
out they came.
out they came.
Yeah.
A lot of people were upset by that.
And this is where we got to, that's just my point. Are we going to be in charge of our community, or is DOT? Now, that's a DOT road out there. They
Right.
maintain it. They patrol it. Highway Patrol is supposed to run patrol on it, but you seldom see them there.
Yeah.
25 years I've been here, I've got pulled once for towing it a little too much, but and I haven't seen many police out there at all, and I go on it every day, numerous times a day.
Yeah.
But I just don't believe in cut down the trees, and I think that it's just going to be our signature road or not. If it is, leave it alone.
Right.
You can say that about the whole county. I mean, this is
Yeah.
a signature county, and
Yeah.
we're in some ways losing it
Yeah.
because of the amount of trees that are giving way to
Yeah.
these, homes.
Yeah, and they're going to mess up US 1, 15501, with those turnarounds are getting ready to clog up traffic. What they do is it clumps traffic, which I think makes it more dangerous when you got a bunch of cars all of a sudden clumped together,
Yeah.
and you got the side-by-siders that won't let traffic move. And it's going to happen on US 1, and it's going to lock in businesses so people won't go to it, because they'll say, okay, if I want to go into this business, I got to go down a half a mile, wait in a long line of cars to do a U-turn, come back, and then pull in. And they'll just go somewhere else instead. And a lot of businesses are going to be hurt by this.
Yeah. Our economy is moved by jobs, and where are those jobs coming from, and who are the people who are moving into the area. And they're not the same people that were moving into the area in the year 2000.
Yep.
The demographics are definitely shifted, and you see it as you go around the area. And so at what price growth? And that's going to be a topic that's going to come up all year. And it's a hot topic, and it's an emotional topic. And I mean, you've been here 25 years, and your vantage point is well respected, as is yours, Geoff. It's something we'll just monitor as we go. I mean, I don't think we have any answers today, but I think we're going to hear some things from DOT shortly, are we not?
Well, I think next will come the detailed plans, and we're going to see just how much they're going to sterilize that road out there.
Right.
And it'll look like
the
roads in Charlotte and Raleigh and Cary and everywhere else, and 211. It's going to be all sterilized in the middle and with some little planting supposed to take out to replace the character that's there now. Yeah. Once it's plowed under, you don't get it back.
This, Dorothy, not a bad topic to start the year off on, huh? We hope to have some more shows on this issue and others that revolve around growth as we go. Geoff Cutler, thanks for coming in and sharing your expertise and your obvious credibility and your love for the area. That all came through loud and clear. And Steve, thanks for coming. It's been 9 years.
My pleasure.
This is the first time you would sit at a table with me after 9 years.
Well, I've tried not to interfere with your show.
Dorothy, I'll see you next week.
I will be here.
And thanks again for all your help last year, and look forward to working with you this year.
Me too.
This is All Things Moore County. Have a great week.